back. I want to talk about completing the square. This is a little bit of an abstract concept of taking something that's not a square and creating something that is a square. We call it a perfect square if it's something in parentheses like that squared. So 9 is a perfect square because you can write it as 3 squared. Now x squared plus 6x is not a perfect square as it stands. We want to create a perfect square. And so what we do to create a perfect square is we add the thing that will make it perfect. So the thing that we need to add here is what we say b divided by 2 squared. If we add that to this, so that's x squared plus 6x. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 is the thing that makes this into a perfect square. In other words, we can now factor this into x times x, 3 times 3, inner and outer, and you get x plus 3 squared. So the thing that perfects this or makes it into a perfect square is a 9. And then this becomes the square root of 9 is what goes in this spot. To get the perfect square, to complete the perfect square. Let's do, now we actually can use this to solve quadratic equations. It's a little overkill, but it does allow us to get to a solution. We're going to use the quadratic formula in the next video. But for now, let's complete the square. So to complete the square, you bring all the x's to the left. You actually leave the constants on the right. This is not the zero product property. Keep that in mind. We're doing completing the square. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the thing that completes the square on the left, which is half of b squared. B is the coefficient on x. You take half of it and you square it. You add it to both sides. It would mess up the equality if we didn't add it to both sides. So now we have a perfect square on this side. Let me show you, get a little more room here. So we now have x squared minus 4x plus, now half of negative 4 is negative 2 squared, you get 4. This is 10 plus 4. So this is a perfect square on the left. This is x minus 2 squared. Just check that. It's a perfect square. If you factor this, if you do the first, you get x squared. If you do the outer and inner, you get negative 2x plus negative 2x is negative 4x. And the last would be negative 2 squared, which is exactly 4. This sets us up to use the square root property because now we have a square on the left, we have a number on the right, so we can take the square root of both sides, and as we're just going to get rid of our square, don't forget that you need a plus or minus because both the positive and the negative will produce that value of 14. So the left becomes x minus 2, the right becomes plus or minus the square root of 14. You look for perfect squares within 14, doesn't have any, 7 times 2, nothing perfect inside. And so you finish this out by bringing the 2 to the right, and there's our answer. This is a very unusual number. The only other way to get this answer would be through the quadratic formula, which we're going to do in the next video. Let's do, let's see, let's do one more. Let's do number 14. So x squared minus x plus 1 equals 0. Let's do this by completing the square. Here we go. One more time just to show you the details here. We're going to bring the positive 1 to the right as a negative 1. We're going to add half of b. So this one's going to be a little harder because we've got some fractions going on. Half of b quantity squared, and you add that to both sides to keep everything equal. And so you get x squared minus x plus a quarter equals negative 1 plus a quarter. You're going to get that quarter on both sides. Keep it equal. Now, don't start canceling those quarters. We want to keep the quarter. Now, that's the left is a perfect square now. You can actually write it as not x plus, but x minus. It's half of b is what ends up going here. The square root of half of b. So minus. So that the half of b is what's going here. And that is squared, and so you've got the negative a half x times a negative half x gives you the middle, which is a whole negative x, and then negative half times negative half is a quarter. It's all looking good. On the right hand side we've got 3/4. This is a little harder, so hang with me here. You take the square root of both sides, you get plus or minus the square root of 3/4, which, by the way, is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. Square root of 3 over 2. You bring the half over, and there's our answer. X equals a half plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. Some people like to write that with, say they have a common denominator, so you could write this with a single denominator. But we have to break this up. There's a 1 plus the square root of 3 divided by 2 answer, and there's a 1 minus the square root of 3 divided by 2 answer. All right, we'll do the quadratic formula in the next video. Thanks for watching.